Hi guys, welcome to another process video. Today I'm using actually 5 3x3 photos, and they're just printing right now, and I want to play around with layout. And actually I wanted to figure out how I wanted to lay them out before I committed to 3x3. So I like how that looks. I just wasn't sure if 3x3 would be too crowded for 5 photos, but I actually really like how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and print them at 3x3. And now I'm having a look at the sweater weather kit from Scrapbooking Cards today. And I've already used this kit for one layout that you'll be seeing on Monday, but I wanted to make another fall themed layout today. And so I'm just going to have a look at what I have left of the pattern paper. There's quite a lot left. I'm starting with this white paper with the tiny triangles all over it. It's from the Outfitters collection from Pink Paisley. And then I'm also grabbing a couple of other papers. So I have those 2 fall themed pattern papers are from Echo Park, and this one is from Pink Paisley from the Outfitters collection. These are the 2 from Echo Park from the Fall is in the Air collection. So these are potentials. And then I have that piece of wood grain cardstock. That's that brown cardstock. It has a wood grain texture to it. And then this one is also from Pink Paisley from the Outfitters collection. That's going to be my background piece. And then I have this piece of basil paper. I think it's called marshmallow something. Yeah, marshmallow plaid. And I'm thinking about using that for a background, but I'm not going to. And then I have this brown piece of cardstock that has a wood grain texture. That's from American Crafts. And I also have a piece of plain white basil. And you see that I have the sticker, or not the stickers, but the stamps picked out from the kit. That is from the sweater weather kit. And I think that almost everything I'm going to use, except for the homemade leaves, that I'm going to actually make a completely separate video about making the leaves. So everything except the leaves, I think, came from this kit. Oh yes, and I think I used some wood veneer from the Freckled Fawn embellishment kit for the month of October as well. So I'm going to start by trimming down all my photos. As I mentioned, they are printed at 3x3, and I printed them on my home printer, which is an Epson PictureMate Charm, and I actually printed up 2 of one of them because all of these photos have a bunch of random kids who aren't my own in them, but usually it's the backs of their heads, or they're so tiny that you can't quite see them. But one of them had quite a few children whose parents I don't know, and because I was going to be making this video, I just printed one with all of those faces blurred out, and that's what I'm going to use for most of the composition of this video and also for all of my close-up photos. And then I also printed one in which the faces are not blurred out, and then right before I put it in there's the one. So that's the one with the blurred out faces, and right before I put it in my album, I will switch out the photo, and I'll talk a little bit about how I'm going to do that a little bit later. It's mostly for the close-up photos as opposed to the video. You're not going to be able to see anybody's faces in video, but anyhow, I will point it out when I get to that part. So I'm going to start by matting all of these photos, all 5 of them, with a very narrow and thin brown mat. And this is with that textured cardstock that came in the kit. I'm using such a tiny amount of it that I really, I didn't need to use the textured kind. I could have just used regular brown because you're not really going to be able to see very much of the texture, but it does add a teensy weensy little bit of interest to these photos. And so I'm trying to just mat them all so that they're pretty much even. And once I cut one strip that is the right width, then all of the other photos should fit on that strip. But because I have 5 photos, I actually have 6 because I am going to go ahead and because I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with this layout, like I have no idea what my design is going to be, I go ahead and I'm going to mat my 6th extra photo. This is the one that doesn't have the faces blurred out, that I'll do that last minute switcheroo with. And I'm just putting that one up at the top of my kind of out of screen for the video, but in a place where I won't forget it. And so this is going to be my background piece, and I'm just playing around with placement here, and here's the problem. So all of these photos face the wrong way. Everybody's running towards the left instead of running towards the right. And so I can't line these up in a nice way that tells a nice story because everybody's facing the wrong direction, like backwards from the way that I want them to face. Usually I like people to be running from left to right, the way that we read. And so because these photos face the opposite way, and that's because of the orientation in which I was standing relative to the runners, and I'm going to arrange them in a circle on my project. And I knew that when I started. Now I'm thinking about, my first idea was to call this Harvest Hustle. And so harvest and hustle are both very long words if I use those thickers that I really, really wanted to use. But this let's go just seems to fit so beautifully in the middle of these photos that I really can't resist just using this as my title. And this is of course the stamp set that comes with that sweater weather kit. And so I'm actually going to stamp let's go on this patterned paper, which is from Echo Park. I have my scrapbooking sized MISTI tool. This is my 12 by 12 MISTI tool. And I'm just going to use it to play around with placement of that word go on this patterned paper. And basically, I want to get a selection of fall colored floral prints, I guess, inside of the boundaries of those letters that say go. And so I really like placing it over here because there are these little delicate red flowers that I really want to catch. And so they show up in the G when I put it there. So I'm just going to ink up my stamp and I'm going to stamp it. I'm actually going to double stamp it. I didn't really need to, but I wanted it to be really, really bold. So I went ahead and I'm going to re-ink it. And that's one of the benefits of using the MISTI tool is that not only does it help with exact placement, but it allows you to double stamp because of the exact placement. Now I'm just going over some of the parts that didn't quite stamp properly with a marker just to make sure that that line is nice and even all the way around the letters of the word go. And now I'm rough cutting it with my large scissors and I'm going to fussy cut it with my little tiny scissors. These are Cutter Bee scissors that I'm going to be using. Oops, first I'm just writing down my supplies on this little list. That just helps with my narration, although I use so few supplies on this one that I didn't really need to write down my supplies. So I have just a couple of tips here for fussy cutting. So leave a little bit of a border all the way around your words. I mean, you don't have to, but this is what I like to do because it makes the whole process just a little bit more forgiving. If your scissors are a little bit wobbly or you accidentally zig when you're supposed to zag, it doesn't cut into the design at all. And the halo just, I'll show you something that you can do with the halo to make it white a little bit later. And I'm just holding my scissors still and I'm moving the paper around instead of kind of trying to move the scissors all over the place, kind of like in and out and in and out. I just leave the scissors in one place. And I actually tried to leave my whole entire arm pretty stationary. Now I have my Dylusions white paint pen and it had a bit of a messy tip because I had been using it for mixed media and I was doing a big no-no, which is writing on black paint that wasn't dry. And so my tip got all messy, but the good thing about paint pens is that the tips clean off pretty easily when you just flow the paint. So now it's nice and white again and I'm just coloring in that entire halo. And that just, I find that sometimes when you stamp over pattern paper and you cut it out and leave the halo, the pattern paper that's on the other side of the stamped line, it just is a little bit distracting. And so I'm just taking my pen and I am just putting some paint all the way around the outside of that halo so that the halo is white instead of having the halo be patterned paper. And you don't have to worry too much about being absolutely perfect with this because if you nudge off a little bit of the stamped line, you can just go back with a black marker or a black paint pen and fix up those black lines when you're finished. And I am going to do that, although I won't do it right away. I'm going to let the paint dry and I'm going to do something else for a little while. So you see, it's a little tiny bit messy. But I'll fix it up a little bit later. I promise I'll fix it up. So boy, I hope I zoom out pretty soon. Yeah, so that's how that looks, and I'm just thinking about using the word let's, and I can't decide what I'm going to put the word let's on. So I thought about maybe one of those cork pieces that came in the freckled fawn, and now I'm very sorry that I forgot to zoom out. It seems like I do this all the time these days, but anyhow, I'm just playing around with what things I can put on this layout, and so I pulled out the freckled fawn wood veneer arrows, but then I thought they looked like they were a little bit too big. So now I went away for a while, a long time actually, and made a whole lot of pattern paper, deli paper with fall colors with using my jelly plate. And then I cut them out with my Cameo into the shapes of leaves that were part of the digital cut files that were designed to go along with this kit. So there they are. That's what they look like. And I really love how they turned out. And I had a lot of fun, but it did take like an hour or so just to make the paper and to cut and figure out how to get my silhouette to cut deli paper and all of that sort of thing. So here I am just going back in and fixing up those lines on the word go just to make it look nice and neat and tidy. These little details really make a big difference in the overall look of the layout, just to give it a nice polished look. It's worth the extra time. This layout took most of the day for me to do between the jelly printing and all of the handmade embellishments that kind of go on this project. It was a lot. But it was a really, really fun process. So I started at about 8 o'clock this morning, and I'm narrating right now at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I did stop and have a little lunch, and I had a coffee with Scott too, but I spent most of that time making this layout. So this is kind of like, it kind of brings me back to my days when I was just getting started scrapbooking, when I used to make everything that went on my layouts because I didn't have any of those nice embellishments that you can buy. So I'm just playing around with placing these leaves around this layout, and this is not my idea. I've seen a couple of different layouts. I know that Jen Scow has done this on a layout a couple of months ago, and I'm pretty sure that I've seen other people do it since then. I think that this is a bit of a trend, is to have your photos go in a circle and have like a wreath of leaves that run a circle all the way around your project. Or maybe in the summer we were doing flowers. I'm not entirely sure, but I've definitely seen this before. I didn't think it up myself. So I'm trying to spread out the leaves so that I have, I actually cut 2 different sizes. And so one of the sizes is the size that the leaves just came at when you just cut it right off the file that you get from Scrapbooking Cards Today. And then one is smaller. So those larger leaves are pushing 3 inches and as their widest part, and then the smaller ones are pushing 2 inches. So that's obviously very approximate. But I just wanted to have a variety of different sizes, and there are 3 different shapes there that I just repeated over and over again, and I cut a whole sheet of them on my silhouette, and I actually cut 3 entire deli sheets of these leaves, and the process video for that is linked in the information section for this video. And so I'm just kind of being mindful of spreading the white around the page, because there are white accents on some of these leaves, but not all of them. And I'm also just mindful that I don't have too much red in one place. Like I'm trying to spread the red all the way around the layout as well. And that's going to balance off with the red that I have on the tag behind the word go. So at this point, I realized, and the thought occurred to me before this, but I just didn't do it, that I would want to outline these leaves. And it would have been much, much easier if I had outlined them before I put them on the project. And they're all just stuck on there with just regular scrapbook adhesive, just my tape runner by 3L. And so it's, it's not that hard to pull them back and outline them after the fact. It's just I have to do it a little bit more carefully because I don't want to go off of the page or off of the leaf and mark on the leaves below. And I also decided to add a couple of veins on the leaves as well, just for a little bit more interest so that they look more like leaves. The reason I'm adding the outlining is it looked like kind of just like little bundles of orange colored paper. You couldn't quite tell that they were leaves once they were all overlapping with each other. And so adding the border all the way around them with the outlining just emphasizes the fact that these shapes are actually leaves and not just blobs. And when I was cutting these out with my silhouette, they didn't cut perfectly, and I just went with it. I just left them a little bit torn and a little bit like I wasn't too careful about pulling them off of my cutting mat. And that just kind of goes with the theme of these fall leaves, because when you pick up a leaf that when the leaves have all fallen, most of them are not perfect. They're usually broken up and eaten by caterpillars and kind of crumpled a little bit. So I thought that added a little bit to the realism of these paper leaves. And the reason I chose deli paper, I'm going to talk about it in my other video, but the reason I chose deli paper is so that it would have more of like a crumpled up thin feeling like actual leaves actually have, as opposed to die cut paper that definitely has a thicker feel to it than leaves actually do. Especially once they've fallen on the ground, they tend to dry out and get quite thin and brittle. And so I thought that the deli paper would replicate that. And plus, I just got my package of deli paper and was itching to use it, so that's another reason. Oh, there's Chloe saying hello. And I'm just using my Faber-Castell Pitt pen for all of this outlining, including the word go when I had to trace around that to outline it. And the white pen I used for the word go, I don't know if I told you when I kind of outlined the halo, it was a Dylusions paint pen. So there's still a couple of gaps. After I outlined all the leaves that were already on my project, I'm going to add just a couple final touches of extra leaves just to fill in the gaps around my project. And I wanted this to have not a perfect circular wreath, but just kind of like to look like casually placed wreath or ring of leaves or piles of leaves in between the photos. I don't know. Depends on how you think about it. And so now that I've placed remember I said that I had cut those leaves at 2 different sizes. So now that I've placed all of the large leaves, I'm now going to go ahead and place the smaller leaves. And I'm placing the smaller leaves second so that you can see them a little bit better. And I'm trying to place the small leaves so that you can see them in terms of contrasting colors as well. Although all these colors are pretty much the same. So I wasn't quite able to do as good a job on that as I had intended, but anyhow, the outlining helps to differentiate them. Oh, that's looking so pretty and so fall-like. And I was thinking in the back of my mind that I might try to even this circle out, like kind of bring it down the bottom, kind of like the bottom right-hand corner of this layout. I thought about kind of trying to make those leaves go down a little bit more to make them more of a perfect circle. And then I decided that I actually wasn't going to, because I kind of like the fact that it looks very organic. It looks kind of like everything just kind of fell here. So again, there's lots of handmade, like kind of personalized parts to this. So I'm going to add some texture to this tag. So I'm just looking for an embossing folder that's not going to be too busy. So I have this Swiss dot one from Stampin' Up. And before I emboss it, I'm going to take off the reinforcer because I don't like the look of an embossed reinforcer. It seems a little strange. So I took off the reinforcer, ran it through my dotted embossing folder, and you see how that just kind of, it cracks the cardstock a little bit so that those dots end up looking a little bit white, which is it just adds a little bit of detail. I made a bit of a mess with this glue. Ugh, that glue. It has a little bit larger, so I'm going to use a baby wipe to wipe it up. And it actually worked because the shipping tags have a bit of a sheen to them. I'm going to layer one extra leaf, and some of the leaves I cut from a much lighter piece of deli paper. It only has one layer of paint instead of multiple layers of paint, and so you can see there's a part where it's transparent, and so I wanted to use one of those lighter leaves on this title part, just to set that leaf off from the other leaves that are on the project, although I'm going to end up blending it in anyways. But I'm just going to attach the leaf to the word go, and then I'm thinking about how can I adhere that little leaf or feather paper clip. Then I thought maybe what I'll do is I will wrap some twine around the O and have it look like that twine is holding the leaf and the paper clip in place on the O. And so this is a piece of lawn trimmings, and I just liked the warm shade of blue that it is. It picks up on some of the blues that are in this pattern paper and the word go. That really, that's the only place that you can see it is in the G of the word go, but it still picks up on that blue, which I really like. And it is a nice warm fall-like blue. So I like that. I kind of wrapped it over and over and over again just to give it a bit of a heavy look. And I'm not sure if I love it. It looks a little bit messier and bulkier than I'd like it to look. But again, this is a fall layout, so it doesn't, I don't really need it to be delicate per se. So it seemed like that was an awful lot of red. So I'm going to put some strips of this gold washi tape with clear transparent stars. And I'm going to just put a strip of that behind the word go, and that will just tone down the redness a little bit and give me a little bit more contrast between my title and the background that it's on. So now I'm going to take off that reinforcer once again and put the washi tape back. And now I have a 1/4 inch hole punch, and it's just from the office supply store. Like it's a school hole punch, and that gives me the right size hole. And then I just used my Tombow Mono Multi adhesive because I know that adhesive better, so I'm less likely to make a mess out of it because I know the nozzle and how it works. So I did use some Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive on the back of that word go. And so you see this is a very elaborate title piece, and thus the length of this project today, the fact that it's 3 o'clock and I'm just finishing now. But I really like the detail. I think it's really worthwhile. I am going to place that hedgehog on the project too, but not until I get my title in its place. And so I think I'm going to nestle it over like this. And my problem is, what on earth am I going to do with that space above the word go? See that big bunch of background paper showing? I'm thinking I will put there's some burlap that I cut off. It was part of a burlap flower that came in this kit. And on my other project that I made using this kit, which won't be up until Monday, I unraveled some of those burlap flowers and made them smaller. And so I have some extra burlap hanging around in this kit. I thought about lowering that picture, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it up where it was. I think I might have lowered it a tiny bit, but not much. Now this is the Freckled Fawn October embellishment kit, and it came with all of these wood veneer arrows, and I thought that these might tell the story a little bit for me to show that you start at the beginning, and then you kind of go around the field, and then the very last photo there on the right is the finish line. So I'm actually not going to use that last arrow because it makes it look like it's a recurring loop, but it's actually not. It ends at the photo up in the top right hand side. So also in the Freckled Fawn embellishment kit, there were these little sequin leaves, which are really throwing off this page. I thought I'd place them and just see if I like them. They add a bit of shine and sparkle to the page, but it's really not working, so I'm going to take them off. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do about that gap of space above the word go, and I have to put the word let's on there as well, which is on the stamp set. So I'm keeping in mind the fact that let's is going to be right above the O, but I want my journaling to also be above the letter G. So because I'm grabbing that orange tag for my stash to use, I'm going to do the exact same thing again and run it through that Swiss dot embossing folder. I took off the reinforcer first and just putting away my die cut machine, my Big Shot, and now I'm going to wrap those 3 pieces of washi tape around this tag again so that it'll be pretty much a coordinating second tag to kind of go with the red one. Using the same hole punch and some Tombow Mono Multi adhesive, and I'll just put that reinforcer on, and then I'll grab a piece of that Lawn Fawn lawn trimmings so that all of the twine on this project coordinates with each other. I guess it's kind of a gray color. It's not really blue, is it? I don't know why I thought it was blue. It's a dark, dark blue. So I really like how this looks. I quite like it. And I just went into my stash, and this was in my scraps, and it's actually a piece of that white wood grain textured cardstock that American Crafts makes, and I had a scrap of it. And for my Take 10 texture class, which I'll leave the link for that in the information section for this video too, but for my Take 10 texture class, I talked about that paper, and I just swiped an ink pad over it to just bring out the texture a little bit. And so that's what that little piece of wood grain paper is. And I thought that it really complemented this project quite well in that it brought some more white to the foreground of this project. I didn't want white to be only in the background. So it brings white, but because it's already distressed with that ink pad, it brings white, but not in a way that really adds a whole lot of contrast, and it doesn't distract you or anything. It just tones down the orange. I think that whole chunk in the middle would have been much too dark if I didn't have that piece of paper there. So there, I just put away those sequin leaves. I'll use those on another project. And then I'm just taking little tiny bits of burlap, and I'm kind of pulling out the threads of them so that they look really casual and loose. And I'm gluing one little bit in each of the clusters of leaves. And that's just for added interest. And it gives it a bit of a rustic, old, it gives it a rustic feel, but without being too distressed, you know? So I'm not a huge fan of a highly distressed look. So I really like the idea of adding burlap as a way to just add some texture and a bit of grunginess to the page. And it still has that nice crisp winter white type of feeling to it. So this is a piece of vanilla cardstock from Stampin' Up, just from my stash, and I have an embossing buddy that I just ran over my paper so that the embossing powder will only stick to where I stamped. And I used some Versamark ink, which is just a glue, and then I used some gold Stampin' Up embossing powder. And then I just used my heat gun to emboss that. And now here I am running into some trouble because I didn't realize that this little tray has a plug. I had a blue one of these, and I got this from a friend of mine who was downsizing her craft supplies. And I didn't realize that hers had a plug in it because my blue one didn't come with a plug. So there you go. I'm going to throw away that plug because I don't really need it. So again, I used my big scissors just to rough cut around the word let's, and now I'm using my Cutter Bee little fussy cutting scissors to cut all the way around, and you see I'm keeping my scissors in one place and I'm moving the paper around and around. So I like how that looks. I think it looks really nice. But I need one more layer behind the Let's, because it looks like Let's is just kind of added there at the last minute, because it sort of was. And so I don't want to make it, I want to make it look more integrated to the project so that it looks like it belongs. So I took my Martha Stewart scalloped circle punch, which is, this punch is probably one of my most used punches. It is such a versatile shape. It's perfect for doing exactly this, which is kind of just putting a little something behind something else that needs a little integration, or just to bring things together. So I'm using the broad point of my Zig Writer marker, which I think is a 0.7 tip. And then I'm just going to tuck it in behind the word go. And I've added a little pop dot to the top. And I just took the adhesive backing off of it so that it'll stick in place. And I like the pointy look of that scalloped circle. It kind of replicates the points on some of the leaves. Now, these arrows were looking a little bit too stark for me. I do really love the look of plain unfinished wood veneer, but in this case, I'm going to do a little something to it. So I thought I really wanted them to be yellow, and then I thought I'm going to make them gold, because remember how I was going to put those sequin leaves on? They were just a little bit too bright and shiny, but I do want something shiny, just not quite that shiny and reflective. So I'm just painting these with this Liquitex acrylic ink. And I'm just using a very inexpensive paintbrush for this. And then because it was a little bit too drippy and went over the edges of some of them, I'm just going to paint the edges too, just so that it doesn't look quite so messy from the sides. And this is another extra detail that really I didn't really need to do, but at this point, I'm like 4 hours into this project, so I'm feeling like, I might as well just go all the way and do every single little detail of this page. So I don't think that it's been years since I've spent this long on a single page. But it felt quite nice to just kind of absorb myself in the process. My kids are away at camp. They're actually camping out in the woods, and it is the end of October. There's a huge rainstorm this weekend, so I feel kind of bad for them. But I'm sure they're having fun slopping around in their boots. Anyhow, so I did take the time to do the edges of those, and I don't know if it matters or not, but I did it. So now I just grabbed my layout, and my first plan was that I was just going to sew over the leaves only. And then once I started sewing onto the photos, I just decided that I'm just going to make my stitching go all the way around this project. And this was a last minute decision, and I didn't really plan it out all that well, but it's okay. I just added some back stitching every here and there just to make it look, I guess, casual and rough, so that any of my mistakes look like they're sort of there on purpose, because this circle is not very smooth. And so adding the back stitching every once in a while just makes it look like it's not smooth on purpose. And I'm just very careful that I am putting the leaves, like straightening them out as I sew, so that I'm not sewing them down folded over. I'd rather sew them down straight. Not straight, but kind of flat. You can see Chloe there cleaning her tail. Isn't she cute? So now that's done, and here it is. I'm just going to trim up the thread that's left. And now that the sewing is done, I can put the title piece on. And of course, that's also going to house the journaling. And these arrows are feeling pretty dry by now, so I'm just going to use my Tombow Mono Multi adhesive to glue them down. And I want them to be just a little askew, like not too lined up. I want them to look, again, kind of casually dropped there. I'm going to use a Zot glue dot to put this little adorable little hedgehog flare badge that I love so much. It looks like he's running the race too. And then I'm not going to put the final arrow in because it kind of doesn't fit with the story. And wow, I'm almost done, but wow, isn't this a long one? And so I'm just playing around here with how I'm going to replace that photo at the very end, which you guys won't see, but I will do it. I actually have already done it. So I just grabbed my vintage typewriter. This is a typewriter that I got from a local typewriter collector. It was in the middle of a project. My old vintage typewriter broke in the middle of using it, and I was on a deadline for the Scraptastic Kit Club, and it was literally mid-project, and so I'm just checking the length of that so that I know that it's going to fit in the spot where I'm intending to put it. I had to go on Kijiji, find a typewriter, get in my car, and go. I had an apron on, my hair was a mess, I was wearing like sweatpants, and I drove to this man's house and picked up this typewriter, and he was just impressed that I was going to use it because he was a collector and he doesn't use his typewriters. He thought I was buying it as a home decor item, and I was like, no, I need to use it like right now. So anyhow, I am typing out all of the journaling that I need for this. So it's not only the journaling that's going to go right above the title, but I'm also going to do a couple of little journaling strips on some, but not all of the photos. I thought that if I put journaling strips on all the photos, it would be a little bit of overkill, so I didn't do that. And this is just a piece of craft paper from my stash. I don't know what brand it is, but it's a bit of a subdued craft. Like it's a grayish, cool craft instead of the really orangey kind. So that one says finish line, and it's on the finish line photo. And then one says on your mark, get set, go. And I put that on the first one. And then the journaling strips that I'm cutting out right now just say, Sophie ran the Harvest Hustle race at her school again this year. And one of them is longer, so it can extend up above the word let's. And then this one says second lap. And so now I'm just going to use some Tombow Mono multi-adhesive to glue these strips down. I love using liquid adhesive for journaling strips because if you need to scooch them around a little bit, it's a little forgiving so that if you get them crooked, you can just straighten them out a little bit. And you've got just a few seconds. You don't have too long to do that. I'm just tucking the date in underneath of here, and you can't see it all that well, but if you look hard enough, you can see it. It's meant to be just a tiny little detail, not a design element or anything. And now you see how they're sewing over this photo, and now I just glued a glue strip over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut out the people, and I'm going to place it like that right before I put it in my album. Which of course I already did, but yeah. So now I just have, this is my large tri-art palette, and I now have 3 of these in my craft room. Oh, I love having 3 of them. I've used all 3 of them today, so I'm so glad that I have multiples. I'm just taking more of that Liquitex ink, and I'm using the nozzle of a Heidi Swapp mist, Color Shine mist container. And I'm just dripping droplets of that really intense gold ink in just around all of the clusters of leaves. And then I also put some around the title just for a little bit of interest. Of course, a splatter landed on the embossed word let's, because that's just the way it always goes. You have to let go of it when you're doing ink splatters. You just have to go with it. If it lands someplace you don't like, you just have to accept it. Look at those leaves. I couldn't resist adding that photo because I was so proud of them. It took a long time to make them, so I had to get another photo in there. So here are the close-ups. I do have quite a few photos of this project just because It reflected a little funny when I was taking the pictures, and I wanted to get pictures that included all the different angles and all the different clusters of leaves. I really love the jelly printed deli paper leaves. I think that they are the star of this layout, and they just add so much richness and texture to this page. I am so in love with my jelly plates, and this one was my big giant jelly plate that I just got last week. So thanks so much for watching. I'll put on some music and you can look at the rest of these videos. Have a really great, the rest of these photos, of course. Have a really great scrappy week.